Tom Cruise went from a crazy man jumping on couches to the king of Hollywood. But is everything we see real, or is it all fake? People don't respect him because of Scientology, but Tom says, "I'm proud to be a Scientologist. I am Tom Cruise, and I've never said this publicly before. I've lived 63 years in the spotlight. That also means 63 years of hiding secrets, big secrets. The media has written thousands of stories about me. They say I'm fake. They say I'm not real, but I've stayed quiet. I haven't said anything for more than half my life. But today, things are different. People know me from crazy stunts. They know me from billion-dollar movies. They see me smiling on red carpets. But the truth, behind every smile is pain. Behind every movie is blood. Behind everything is loss. I've lost so many people. I've given up so much love. I made terrible choices at the worst times. I know my wife, my children, and all of you have questions. Big questions. Why can I hang off the tallest building in the world, but I can't hold onto my family? Why did my perfect marriage with Nicole Kidman fall apart so fast? Was Nicole the love of my life? Did Scientology break us apart? Why is there a child with my last name who I haven't seen in over 10 years? Did I abandon her? Why can I face death in every stunt, but I'm too scared to face my own heart? Today, for the first time ever, I'm going to tell you the truth, not as a movie star, but as a man who has hurt people, a man who has made mistakes. This is my way of saying sorry to everyone who loved me. Are you brave enough to hear the truth? Press number 10 if you're ready. The beginning. I still remember that day in 1989. It's like a movie I can't forget. I was 27 years old. I was famous from Top Gun and Rain Man. The world started calling me Tom Cruise like it wasn't just my name anymore. It was a brand, a symbol. And that was the problem. When the world sees you as a symbol, you forget how to be a normal person. That day, Nicole Kidman walked onto the movie set like a cold breeze on a hot summer day. She was 5 years younger than me. She was only 22. She had bright blue eyes and curly red hair. Her hair looked messy, like she just woke up. The first time she looked at me, I froze. It felt like someone threw a rope around my heart and pulled it hard. I wasn't someone who fell in love easily, but she had this soft voice and confident walk that made me realize my life was about to change. I remember the first time she walked up to me. We were practicing our lines for the movie. I don't know why, but I felt small, weak, like she could see all my secrets. Just a few months later, we fell in love, fast like a race car. At the end of 1990, on December 25th, we got married. It was in a small church in Colorado. There was snow everywhere. No big press, no reporters, just a few people we loved, the cold wind, and two young hearts who believed love could fix everything. Nicole said something to me on our wedding night. I still remember it clearly. It was beautiful but also painful. "Tom, don't let Hollywood take us away from each other." I laughed. I held her. I believed nothing could tear us apart. But I was wrong. Hollywood didn't have to take anything. It was me, my own selfishness, my own ambition. That's what pushed Nicole away. The good years. In the first few years of marriage, we were almost always together. In 1992, when our movie Far and Away came out, every magazine called us Hollywood's golden couple. And we looked perfect together. We were charming, successful, and in love. But underneath all the glamour were small cracks. I was so busy. I slept more in dressing rooms than in my own bed. Nicole wanted a peaceful home. I just wanted to conquer the world. Sometimes she'd be lying next to me in bed, but I was already thinking about tomorrow's movie scene. I remember once she said softly, "Tom, you've never really been here." Back then, I didn't understand. I thought she just wanted me to rest more, to spend more time with her. But what she really wanted was for me to be present, not just my body in the house, but my mind, my heart, my soul. Trying to have children. Having children became our biggest struggle. We tried, we hoped, we waited, but years passed with no baby. So in 1992, we adopted Isabella. When we brought her home, Nicole cried like never before. She was shaking. She held Isabella to her chest and said, "Sweetheart, I finally have you." In 1995, Connor came along. I loved being a father, but I still couldn't step away from the spotlight. Nicole was different. She stopped working as much. She took care of the kids. She kept our family warm. She waited for me to come home after being gone for months. And I just kept working. By the year 2000, when we celebrated our 10th wedding anniversary, things started falling apart. Nicole told me later that was when she felt most lost, lost inside her own home. I didn't see it, or maybe I did, but I chose to ignore it. The worst pain. Then came the hardest blow. In early 2001, Nicole got pregnant. It was the good news we had waited almost 10 years for. I remember that afternoon. She placed my hand on her belly and whispered, "Tom, we're going to have a baby." Her eyes were so beautiful in that moment, like the first spring after a long winter. But that joy didn't last. She had a miscarriage. That night was the most painful night of our lives. Nicole lay in the hospital bed. Tears soaked the pillow. Her hand gripped mine like she was holding onto her last hope. She said, "Tom, I'm scared we'll never be the same again." I should have held her tight. I should have been strong for her. But at the moment she needed me most, I let my own fear control me. I buried myself in work, in a busy schedule, in the kind of busyness that makes you forget pain. And just a few weeks later, on February 7th, 2001, I filed for divorce. Nicole only found out through her lawyer. I didn't have the courage to tell her myself. I did the worst thing a husband can do. I walked away from the woman who loved me with all her heart when she was most broken. After the divorce, what came next wasn't just a divorce, it was a storm. Nicole broke down. She said she cried for months. I believe her, because the day she got the divorce papers, she looked at me with red, tear-filled eyes. I will never forget that look. There was no anger, just one question. Why? I couldn't answer. I couldn't say I was scared, scared to look back, scared of the pain, scared of responsibility, scared to face myself. The only thing I knew how to do was run. Nicole lost me, and I lost the most important woman in my life. The two kids, Isabella and Connor, stayed with me. But the price was they grew more and more distant from their mother. Sometimes I wonder, if I hadn't left that day, if I had been stronger, maybe that family wouldn't have broken. But life doesn't have an if. And the worst part, I didn't just make that mistake once. There's someone else, a little girl, a child who has my last name. A child who grew up without me. A child I promised to protect forever. Her name is Surrey. And that's the deepest pain I've ever known. If you think I've already failed as a husband, press number 1. It's what I deserve. Suri, the daughter I lost. If there's one thing in my life I've never had the courage to talk about, it's Surrey. Not because I don't love her, but because every time I think of her, there's a quiet pain that runs through me. A pain I've tried to bury for years. After 2012, everything fell apart faster than I could understand. With Nicole, I can admit my mistakes. I can look back and see where I went wrong. But with Suri, it's different. She's not an adult. She's a child. A 6-year-old girl who looked at the world with innocent eyes, and then watched that world shatter in just a few months. I still remember the last day we stood together. It was at the door of our New York apartment. Katie decided to take our daughter away. She said the world I lived in was too noisy, too much pressure, too many things a child shouldn't see. When that door closed, a strange silence filled my life. It wasn't the calm after a movie director yells cut. It wasn't the quiet before a dangerous stunt. It was the silence of loss. And I stood on the wrong side, the side I didn't choose, but also the side I didn't know how to leave. Missing her childhood. For years, I lived with this haunting feeling. I could reach the entire world, but I couldn't reach my own daughter. I didn't blame anyone. I didn't point fingers. But I always felt there was an invisible wall between me and Suri, a wall I don't know who built, but I know I helped build it, through my absence. I was busy, too busy. While Katie was building a new life for our daughter, I was hanging off the side of the tallest building in the world. I was shooting Mission Impossible. No one told me I was wrong. No one told me I was right. But I know that, when I stood at the highest point in the world, I was also the farthest away from my daughter. Watching from afar. As Suri grew older, I began to feel the distance, not through words, but through pictures in the media. Photos of her holding her mother's hand on the way to school. She wore a pink coat. Pictures of her carrying a backpack bigger than her tiny body. Videos of her hiding from paparazzi on the streets of New York. Every time I saw them, I had the same question. Does she know I'm watching her from far away? But that question never reached her. There were nights after filming. I'd come back to my hotel room in London or Abu Dhabi. I'd sit alone under dim light. And I'd watch old videos of her on my phone. Suri used to smile a lot as a little girl. Her smile could light up the whole room. But as she got older, that smile showed up less and less. I don't know if that's just growing up, or if she felt an emptiness I couldn't fill. And the most painful part, it's not that I wasn't there for those moments. It's not knowing if she even thinks of me at all. Birthdays. What haunted me most over the years were birthdays. I always remember April 18th, the day my daughter was born. It was 2006. I had just finished a dangerous stunt scene for Mission Impossible 3. When I heard Katie was going into labor, I flew back to Los Angeles immediately. I still remember how much I shook when I heard Suri's first cry. It was one of the rare moments in my life when I didn't feel like a superstar. I didn't feel like an actor who could do crazy stunts. I was just a father who understood for the first time what it meant to love unconditionally. But 6 years passed so quickly, I couldn't hold on to that moment. After the divorce, every year on her birthday, I felt like I was watching a broken movie. The beautiful moments faded, the painful ones grew sharper. For years, I'd wake up at 5 a.m. on April 18th. I'd sit by the window. I'd wonder where she was. Was she smiling? Was she crying? Was she blowing out candles alone or with friends? I wanted to reach out, to call, to send birthday wishes, to do everything a father should do. But every time I picked up the phone, something pulled me back. A hesitation, an invisible fear, a thought that my presence might only make her life worse. why I stayed away. People have asked why I haven't appeared publicly with Suri. I never answered, not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know how to give an answer that wouldn't make things worse. Her life had already been loud enough, tiring enough, public enough. And sometimes loving someone means stepping back, letting them grow up without being dragged into the spotlight. But I'll be honest about this, at least my truth. I have missed her so painfully. There were moments when I watched an emotional movie scene, and I thought, if one day she sees this scene, will she understand that her father is trying to say sorry? She grew up without me. As she entered her teenage years, I saw her change through pictures. Suri grew taller, more like her mother, quieter. There's one photo of her at 13 that made me stand still for a long time. She was looking down, holding books in her arms. Her face no longer looked innocent like before. Looking at that picture, I realized I had missed her entire childhood. Not because I wanted to, but because I had lost my way in my own life. For years, I lived in conflict. I wanted to come closer, but every time I tried, I feared I'd disturb the fragile peace she had. I wanted to say, "I love you," but I was afraid those words would come too late. I wanted to apologize, but I didn't know where to start. And then time kept moving, so fast. One day I suddenly realized she was 18. 18, the age when a child is no longer a child. The age when if a father doesn't return in time, he may forever stay on the outside of her life. Her graduation. On the day she graduated from high school, I saw the photos in the news. Suri was wearing a white dress. Her long hair was flowing. Her face was bright. Her smile looked like Katie's. She stood among friends, happy, strong, independent. And there wasn't a single trace of me in that world. It took me a few minutes just to breathe again. Not because I regretted something, but because I had to ask myself in that moment, does she even remember I exist? People say the human heart never truly breaks. But when I looked at that photo, I felt something inside me snap. And I knew it would never be whole again. Maybe that's the price of silence, the price of wrong choices, the price of letting a child grow up without her father's embrace. The pain I carry. I can't talk about everything that happened during those years. I can't talk about the things I heard, the things I felt, the things that made the distance between us grow. But I do know this. Some walls aren't built by others. They're built by time, by hesitation, by our own choices. And by the time we realize it, it's too late to tear them down. Maybe what hurts most isn't the distance between me and my daughter. It's that I'm no longer sure I even have the right to step into her life. I look back at my life, at all the films, the roles, the stunts that amazed the world. And in return, I'm left with an empty space in my heart, a space no character could ever fill. I've hung off the side of airplanes thousands of feet in the air. I've flown helicopters through narrow canyons where one wrong move would mean death. But nothing has ever been more terrifying than the idea of facing the eyes of a child whose life you've been absent from. Now that she's grown, now that she's stepping into her own life, all I can do is stand far away and hope that someday, somehow, we'll find something again, even if it's fragile. I hope she understands that a man can be strong on screen, can be fearless in the face of every challenge, but still be weak enough to lose what matters most, his family. And maybe that pain, the kind that has no name, no shape, but is always there, is what pushed me toward a choice the world has never stopped questioning. Scientology. A relationship no one understands, no one can explain, no one can truly see through. But in the next part, I will finally say what I've never said publicly. Why I walked into it, and why I couldn't walk away. Now that you've watched this far, do you see me as a terrible father? Press number 3 if you do. I think that's the only number that truly fits me. Scientology, how it started. I often tell people that my life is divided into two clear halves. The time before I entered Scientology, and the time after I'd been in it too long to turn back. But the truth is far more complicated. I never entered Scientology the way people imagine. I slipped into it, like someone falling, reaching out for anything to keep from hitting the ground. It was 1986, a year after Top Gun. I was 24 years old, full of pride, full of ambition, full of applause and camera flashes. But what most people didn't know was that underneath all that was a young man terrified of everything. Terrified of failure, of falling back into the poverty of my childhood, of losing control, of the world turning its back on me. When I married Mimi Rogers in 1987, she was the one who introduced me to Scientology. Not by force, but with a gentle suggestion. Tom, maybe this place will help you find the stability you're looking for. And I believed her. The first sessions. Those first sessions at their center surprised me. There was no judgment, no criticism, no one telling me I wasn't enough. On the contrary, they looked at me as if I was born to do something extraordinary. When someone who feels lost is told he's special, he'll believe it. And I did. They made me feel like I'd walked into a room full of light, where everyone understood me, saw me, believed in me more than I believed in myself. And when you're searching for certainty, that kind of belief feels like a drug. With NICOLE. In the 1990s, when Nicole and I got married, Scientology was like a shadow following me everywhere. I never forced her to join, but its presence in my life was something she could never quite reach. There were nights we sat on the balcony of our home in Pacific Palisades, watching the fiery sunset on the horizon. And Nicole would say, "Tom, I don't know what you're looking for in there. You already have everything. Why do you still feel like something's missing?" I couldn't answer her. Not because I didn't understand the question, but because I was afraid of the real answer. I felt empty. The higher I climbed, the lonelier I became. The more films I made, the more I felt like I wasn't really living. Scientology gave me an escape, or so I thought. EYES wide shut. By 1999, when Nicole and I were filming Eyes Wide Shut with Stanley Kubrick, it was the first time I realized I'd stepped into a world no one but me could understand. Kubrick always looked at me with these sharp eyes, like he was studying a creature he couldn't quite figure out. One day after an intense scene, he stared at me for a long moment and said, "Tom, do you know what you're running from?" I laughed it off, dodged the question. But those words followed me for years. I wasn't running from Scientology. I was running from myself. The OPRAH moment, 2005. Then came 2005, a year when both my career and my personal life exploded in ways I never expected. The opera couch moment, the excitement, the lack of control, the confusion. It was like a different version of me the world had never seen. But inside it wasn't madness, it was disorientation. I was working too much, sleeping too little, under too much pressure, with too many eyes watching. Scientology became the only place I felt safe, the only place I could breathe, the only place telling me I was still on the right path. I was like a man lost in the desert, clinging to the illusion of water. And even though I knew it wasn't real, I still drank it. The leaked video 2008. In 2008, an internal Scientology video was leaked. All of Hollywood erupted. I became the center of every conversation. People laughed, mocked, judged. But no one knew that year was one of the darkest of my life. I was trying to hold my family together, trying to keep my career on track, trying to convince myself that everything was still okay. But I felt like I was sinking, deeper and deeper into a world I couldn't even name. I didn't dare say it out loud. I didn't dare admit that I was being torn between two worlds. The world of lights and the world of belief. The divorce with Katie, 2012. Then came 2012, the year Katie and I divorced. I will never speak of the private details of that divorce, not because I don't want to, but because some things belong to too many people. But I can say this, that year I felt split in two, not physically, but spiritually. On one side was the belief I had followed for nearly 2 decades. On the other side was the family I was losing. And I stood in between, like a man painted in two colors who couldn't wash either one off. There were nights after 2012 when I sat alone in my empty house in Beverly Hills, under dim yellow light, staring at a blank spot on the wall. I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't call anyone. I just sat, sometimes for hours, and asked myself, what am I becoming? The cost. I felt like I was standing in a dark room, and every time I chased that belief, I opened another door, only to find a darker room behind it. But I couldn't stop. I always believed I had to be strong, unshakable, a leader. That's the pressure that comes when the world calls you Tom Cruise. It's not just a name, it's a burden. Scientology made me feel like I could carry that burden without breaking. It gave me confidence, certainty, respect. The things I had craved ever since I was a 13-year-old poor kid, watching my father disappear under a mountain of debt. But the deeper I went, the more I realized I had traded more than I knew. No blame. I don't blame anyone. I don't blame the organization. I don't blame the people in it. Those choices were mine. I was the one who stepped in. I was the one who opened those doors. I was the one who thought I could control it all. But some things, once you let them into your mind long enough, they stay. And I know this for sure. My relationship with Scientology affected everything in my life. My marriage to Nicole, my life with Katie, the distance between me and Surrey. I'm not saying it was the cause. I'm not saying it wasn't. I'm saying it was part of the story, a part I let grow larger than all the others. Why I stayed. Still, I held onto it through the years that followed. Because when you've lost too much, you cling to whatever you think is holding you up. I'm not a fool. I'm not someone who can't think. I'm just a man who lost his way and chose a point to hold on to. Even if that point sometimes made me feel cut off from the part of me that's human. Today, looking back on nearly 40 years inside it, I no longer ask myself, why did I stay? I only ask, what has it made me become? And the answer isn't easy. It made me strong, but it also made me so hard that I forgot how to be soft with the people I love. It made me confident, but it also made me forget how to fear loss until I truly lost. It made me feel seen, but it also distanced me from the very people who should have seen me the most. Maybe that's the cost. And only the number 9 is worthy of that price. And maybe only by facing that cost have I begun to understand why I've never stopped chasing death on screen. I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of living a life where I no longer recognize myself. The stunts, why I do them. But that's the story for the next part. The story of the dangerous stunts and the truths no one has heard about them yet. If you've ever loved my films, give me a heart. There's a truth I have never clearly spoken to anyone, not even to the people closest to me. I don't throw myself into dangerous stunts just to make audiences gasp. I don't do it to prove anything to Hollywood either. The truth runs much deeper than that, and maybe darker than anything I've ever confessed. I do those things because that's when I feel alive. The escape. It may sound strange coming from someone who has spent his whole life in front of cameras and spotlights. But it's precisely because I've lived so long under the lights that my life sometimes feels like an endless scene. Everything happening around me, yet I feel no real connection to any of it. I once told a director I trusted, I don't feel truly present unless I'm facing the edge between life and death. He laughed, thinking I was joking. But I wasn't. How it started, 1996. I'll tell you how it started, because everything has a beginning, even madness. In 1996, when the first Mission Impossible was released, I wanted to perform as many dangerous stunts as possible. No one forced me to. I had just stepped out of a broken marriage with Mimi. My career was rising fast, and my personal life was falling apart. I felt out of control on every front. And in that moment, hanging on a cable during the CIA vault scene, for the first time in months, my mind went completely still. No chaos, no anxiety, no voices in my head. Just a pure moment. Either I did it right or I fell. When the scene ended, the whole crew exhaled in relief. I sat alone in the dark, realizing I had found something that pulled me out of the storm inside my mind. An escape, a strange kind of silence I could never find anywhere else. Mission Impossible 2, 2000. As the 2000s began, everything became even clearer. After my marriage with Nicole ended in 2001, my mind felt torn in two. I was trying to smile in front of the press, while trying to understand who I was becoming. And when we filmed Mission Impossible 2, I had already hung off a cliff at Dead Horse Point in Utah, with no safety rope in front of the camera. People said I was reckless, but I was just being honest. Those were the moments when the pain inside me suddenly disappeared. The Biography 2010. In 2005, after the opera video made the world look at me like I was out of control, I became more dependent on film sets than ever. I found refuge in dangerous stunts, places where no one asked me to smile at the right moment. No one demanded perfection. No one asked questions I didn't want to answer. Standing on top of a speeding car, weaving through canyon walls, riding a motorcycle at speeds that could kill me with one mistake. I felt like I belonged to that world, the world where no one judged me, where right and wrong were decided only by whether I survived. But it wasn't until 2010, while filming Ghost Protocol, that I understood just how addicted I had become to these stunts. The scene hanging off the side of the Burj Khalifa, the tallest building in the world. It was the first time I faced death in such a clear, undeniable way. Looking down, there was nothing but scorching desert wind hitting my face, and endless air beneath me. The technicians asked me to wait a day so they could recheck the safety lines. But I said, "Let's go, roll the camera." I didn't want to wait. I was afraid that if I waited any longer, I would start thinking about the things that weakened me. The broken marriage, the wrong choices, the people I had lost. I didn't want to think, I just wanted to jump. The moment I slipped, when my foot slipped off the glass edge and my body dropped outward, for a brief moment, I truly did not know if I would be pulled back or not. But the strange thing is, in that very moment when any normal person would panic, I felt calm. A calmness I could not explain. A calmness I had never felt even inside my own home. The crew looked at me, then the way people look at someone who has lost his mind. I just stood there, breathing hard, staring up at the Dubai sky, and asking myself, why do I only feel relieved when I almost die? That question followed me for years. From Edge of Tomorrow in 2014 to Mission Impossible Fallout in 2018. The Broken Ankle 2018. In Fallout, there was a scene where I jumped from one London building to another. I actually broke my ankle in that jump. When I heard that bone crack with a chilling snap, I knew it had broken. But I still ran a few more steps to finish the shot, because I did not want the crew to start over. People often ask why I don't use stunt doubles. I never answer, not because of pride, but because the real answer is too fragile to say out loud. If I let someone else do the dangerous part for me, I would have to face the truth I always avoid. That I would lose the one thing that still makes me feel truly alive. The real reason. I've said before that I do dangerous stunts to serve the audience. That's true, but it's not the whole truth. I do them because when my life hangs on a single line, my mind becomes so quiet that I can hear my own heartbeat. A heartbeat not drowned by lights, not suffocated by personal chaos, not weighed down by regrets I've carried for too long. There were nights on the set of Top Gun, Maverick, when I flew the FA-18 Super Hornet at speeds that pressed my body, like a giant hand was crushing me. My heart pounded so hard, I thought it might burst inside my chest. But in that moment, I realized something. My fear was not the fear of falling. My greatest fear was when the plane landed, and I had to return to real life. The emptiness. For years, I've used danger to fill an emptiness I didn't dare name. The public knows Tom Cruise, the action actor. No one knows Tom Cruise, the man who cannot tolerate stillness. Stillness reminds me of what I lost. Nicole, Surrey, the years I should have spent with family but didn't. Stillness forces me to face myself. And sometimes facing myself is the thing I fear most. I can't stop. I will not deny it, I still love cinema. I love living inside each character, each scene, each dangerous stunt I perform myself. But behind that surface, another truth exists. Danger is where I find the salvation I cannot find in ordinary life. Once a close friend asked me, "Tom, when will you stop?" I didn't answer, but inside I knew. I will not stop because I cannot stop. I've climbed too high, moved too fast, lost too much to accept a calm life. I thought that the more dangerous stunts I performed, the more I would value life. But in truth, I did them to cover the darkness inside me, a darkness no one truly understands. GTTING older. Today, now that I'm over 60, people see me jump a motorcycle off a cliff in Mission Impossible 7. And they say, no normal person can do that. Maybe they're right. But what they don't understand is this. For me, it's not madness. It's the only way I still feel I have something to hold on to. But then a thought began to creep in. How long before those stunts are no longer enough? How long before I have to face a life without cables, without cameras, without anyone shouting action? Maybe I already know the answer. Maybe I know that day is getting close. And maybe it's time for me to face the biggest question of all. Am I ready to live a real life instead of hiding inside movie scenes? The final truth, loneliness. That's the question that leads me to the final part of my life, the hardest one to express. The loneliness of a man who has everything, yet no longer knows who he is outside the spotlight. Do you want to hear the final chapter, full of truth from Tom Cruise? Comment I want to. 20 years later. 20 years since the day people called us Hollywood's golden couple. 20 years since I stood under the flashing lights, holding Nicole's hand, believing that nothing could ever tear us apart. But that light, was also what burned everything down. Over 2 decades later, people are still looking for answers. Was it a fairy tale, or was it all in our heads? All I will say is, it's been awful. The perfect couple. The whole world thought Nicole Kidman and I were the perfect couple. The most powerful man in Hollywood and the most beautiful woman in Australia. But have you ever wondered why a love like that ended in silence? The smiles on the red carpet, the thank you speeches on stage, the flashing cameras. All of it was just a curtain, hiding another truth. Have you ever lived in a house full of light, but still felt suffocated by darkness? Have you ever laid next to someone you love and still felt completely alone? Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night feeling cold, looked at the person lying next to you, and wondered, is this love or is this control? And I see Elise Payne. We have 2 children. My job now is to protect them. And when a man breaks down crying in the middle of the night, you already know his heart is breaking. I was scared. I thought if I ever dared to speak the truth, the whole world would come crashing down. And I kept asking myself, can love survive when it's locked inside the golden cage of fame? No one knew that behind the golden gates of that so-called happiness was a darkness only I could see. My marriage was a story of downfall, betrayal, forgiveness, and a love that somehow remained even when we both wanted to let go. The disappointment, the pain, the loss that you go through. The first day we met. I remember very clearly the first day we met. January 3rd, 1989, on the set of Days of Thunder in North Carolina. The midday sun reflected off my helmet, and then she walked in. Nicole Kidman, 22 years old, fiery red hair, eyes that looked like they could see through every layer of performance. She walked up, smiled, and said, "Are you really Tom Cruise? I thought you'd be shorter." The whole crew burst out laughing. I laughed too, but inside something shifted. A feeling I hadn't felt since Top Gun. That was the moment everything began. Falling in love. I was a star past 30, recently divorced from Mimi Rogers, longing for a fresh start. And she was an Australian girl who didn't yet understand what Hollywood really was. She still believed every love story had a happy ending. The first time I took her on a motorcycle ride, she screamed into the wind, "Tom, I'm not scared." And I said, "You should be, because I don't know how to stop." That line later on became our destiny. The wedding. Christmas 1990. We got married in secret in Colorado. No press, no glamour, just white snow and 2 people holding hands. Nicole smiled in a simple dress, her eyes glowing with complete trust. She said, "I don't need fame, I just need you." I said, I promise I'll never let you cry. And then I broke that promise. The early years. The early years felt like a dream. She was by my side at every movie premiere. A Few Good Men, 1992. The Firm, 1993. Interview with the Vampire, 1994. On the red carpet, we held hands, and her smile made all of Hollywood believe we had the most perfect marriage in the world. But behind the scenes, Nicole began to realize something. I didn't live for love, I lived for the mission. One evening in June 1992, she said to me, "Tom, you don't love me like a man loves a woman. You love me like a role, something you have to play perfectly." I stayed silent because she was right. I believed control was the only way to protect love. But the more I tried to control her, the more I lost her. Growing apart. By 1993, while she was filming Malice and I was busy with the firm, we started to drift apart. Nicole loved freedom, loved reading poetry, loved taking long walks, loved disappearing for a few days to find her feelings. Me, I was terrified of losing control. I called her every night asking, "Where are you? Who are you with?" She'd answer, "Alone." That answer brought both relief and confusion. Scientology enters. She began asking me about Scientology, the belief system I treated as truth. I tried to convince her to join, but she just shook her head. I believe in love, not in systems. I said, "You don't understand. This saved me from myself." She softly replied, "And maybe it's also what will kill our love." I didn't believe her then, but now, looking back, I wish I had listened. NICOLEBCOMES a star. In 1995, she became one of Hollywood's most sought-after stars after To Die For. I still remember the moment she won her first Golden Globe. She turned to the audience, looked at me, and smiled radiantly. The press said, "The world's perfect couple, Cruise and Kidman, are unbreakable." But that very night, in our Beverly Hills hotel room, we fought for 3 hours. I couldn't stand the fact that she had flown out without telling me. She broke down crying. "Tom, do you love me? Or do you just love that I belong to you?" I didn't answer, because when someone asks that question, the love is already starting to crack. Adopting children. We tried to fix things by adopting 2 children, Isabella and Connor. I believed family would save everything. But maybe we were just hiding the cracks under a new roof. She was a devoted mother, while I was buried in Mission Impossible 1996. I flew around the world, signed contracts, smiled for cameras. But when I came home, her eyes were cold, like the North Sydney wind. One evening at the end of 1997, she stood by the window watching the snowfall and asked, "Are you happy?" I replied, "I have everything. What more could I need?" She turned around and softly said, "You're missing me." I didn't know what to say, because I felt it too, but I didn't know how to find my way back. EYES Wide Shut 1999. In 1999, we worked with Stanley Kubrick on Eyes Wide Shut, a film about the breakdown of a marriage. The seasoned director looked at us and said, "You two are acting out your real lives." I laughed. Nicole stayed silent. The shoot dragged on for over a year. Kubrick made us repeat intimate scenes so many times, we were emotionally drained. And by the time the film wrapped, we barely recognized each other. She said, "Tom, what has this movie done to us?" I replied, "It's not the movie, it's the truth." The premiere, July 1999. The premiere of Eyes Wide Shut in July 1999 was the peak, and also the end. We still smiled, still held hands. But that hand was cold. I knew under the flash of cameras, she was trying to hide something only I could see. She no longer believed in our love. The year I lost everything, 1999. In 1999, I thought I was at the peak of everything. Eyes Wide Shut was about to be released. I had 2 healthy children and a wife admired by the entire world. But no one knew. That was also the year I started losing it all. Stanley Kubrick once said to me during our final shoot, "Tom, you don't realize it yet. When people try to act out a broken marriage, they're paving the way for it to happen in real life." I laughed, thinking the old man was just being philosophical as always. But just a few months later, I realized he was right about every word. The red carpet lie. When Eyes Wide Shut premiered in July 1999, we walked the red carpet hand in hand. The flashbulbs lit up like lightning. Nicole smiled and leaned her head on my shoulder. A smile that made the audience believe everything was perfect. But in her eyes, I saw exhaustion that couldn't be hidden. At the end of the night, she stepped out onto the hotel balcony, looked down at the stream of cars below, and quietly said, "I don't recognize us anymore, Tom." On screen, I saw 2 strangers pretending to love each other. I tried to pull her close. "You're just tired, we'll be okay." She gently shook her head. "No, you don't understand, we're living like them, the 2 people in the film." I stayed silent because I knew she was right. Our love wasn't about emotion anymore. It was about image, about duty, about keeping Hollywood believing that happiness still existed. Kubrick's death. When Kubrick passed away in March 1999, I watched Nicole cry for days. She said he saw something we didn't dare to see. I asked what. She answered the end. But I didn't believe in endings. I believed in control. I believed in faith. Scientology taught me that all pain could be controlled through willpower. But she believed in emotion. Those 2 beliefs couldn't live under the same roof. The question. She once asked me, "Do you think your faith is taking away a part of who you are?" I answered without hesitation, "No, it makes me stronger." She said, "No, Tom, it makes you colder." I laughed, but deep down I was afraid, because she had touched the very thing I was trying to bury. I didn't know how to love without control. Moulin Rouge 2000. In May 2000, she went to film Moulin Rouge in Sydney. I called every night. She was busy, didn't answer. The press showed photos of her beaming, alongside director Baz Luhrmann and co-star Ewan McGregor. People said, "Nicole is coming back to life." And me, I felt like I was dying inside. The Scientology meeting. I went to the Scientology office and sat for hours with David Miscavige, the supreme leader. He said, "Nicole doesn't belong on this path, Tom. She's going to pull you away from your mission." I pushed back, "She's my wife." He just smiled, and that's exactly why she's the most dangerous. That night I came home and couldn't sleep. For the first time, I started seeing my wife as a stranger, someone who could destroy my mission. It was insane, but I believed it. She came home. She came home after 4 months of filming. I stood at the door smiling, "I missed you." She hugged me and softly said, "Me too." But in that hug, I felt distance. Her arms no longer held on the way they used to. The divorce. We tried to fix things. attended the Golden Globe Awards together in January 2001. The whole world said we looked more radiant than ever. But when we got back to our house in Beverly Hills, I said, "Nicole, we need to talk." She looked up, calm. "What do you want to say?" I said, "Divorce." She stood still, no yelling, no asking why. She just said one sentence. "I thought we were forever." I said, "Sometimes to save the person you love, you have to let them go." She laughed through her tears. "Are you sure it's for me, or because you couldn't handle my freedom?" I didn't answer, because for the first time in my life,